Hello, Jack's here. I decided I'm off of work today. My boyfriend's still at work. So I'll hop on for a little bit and see if anybody wants to discuss part 2. So shoot me your questions or comments and we'll discuss for a bit. Only one person on right now. And I know it's a Sunday and I didn't really give a whole lot of notice that I was going to be doing this because I didn't realize it until I got home from work that it's like, oh, I'll pop on for a bit and see if anybody wants to chat. I do plan on, I've watched all 10 episodes. I'm going to watch them again, take notes, and then I'm going to write up a summary of the things that stand out to me for people who don't have the time to watch it, don't want to watch something, and would rather just read something. Apparently I have to watch episode 9 again because one of the SAP moderators said they saw me with Steven Drizzen. I didn't see myself in it, but so I'll check that out. And then I've joked that I would need to, if you do see me even for a second, I guess I need to do the Carla Chase thing and then, make the about me to say I'm in MaM2 in episode 9 in this hour or, this second, this minute. So hi, Kim and Brody and Elizabeth. Yeah, Kim, moderator says that you see me shaking Drizzen's hand. So that would have been at the second time that Brendan's case was in Chicago. So, but things have been crazy for me. I work in politics and we've got the election here coming up on November 6th. So weekends are really busy of having to, get people to vote. So, and Amy left this morning. So, and then my boyfriend had said that he wanted to watch it with me. So maybe when he gets home from work, that'll be our evening that we'll start watching Making the Murderer again. Hello, Amber and Michelle and Rita. So, and then I'm checking on my other screen because there's more people that keep requesting to get in here. So, Nikki just finished part 2. Patty, one of our moderators, has joined. Is my phone still on silent? I have no idea. Kim is rewatching part 2 today. Yeah, my boyfriend had started episode 9 this morning. Whoops, now I dropped my remote. But I had to be to work at noon, so I just didn't have the time. Sorry, I got to pick this up that I dropped. So I'll start over again. And then it was funny while I was at work. My son texted me. I don't think my son I have a 25-year-old son. And my son has never watched Making a Murderer, but his girlfriend is like obsessed. And so my son texted me and he said, okay, we need to figure out a night this week we can go out to dinner or something because Jasmine really wants to know, talk to you all about Making a Murderer. Oh, Amanda or Kim, you said part 2, not episode 2. I'm correcting myself as I'm realizing it. Rita said, I didn't cry when I watched the first season, but I sure cried a few times during part 2. Well, and that's Amy. Every time Brendan came on, she teared up. You know, it's so sad that she can't have any contact with Brendan anymore. Rhonda is going to rewatch part 2 tomorrow. Brody says, this whole thing makes me sick to my stomach, how corrupt these people are. I'm glad to see Stephen's new attorney is bringing up this new evidence, wants to know who killed Teresa, and not only getting Stephen Brendan out, but get to the truth. Right, Brody, and that's something that Stephen says all the time, and then I repeat it all the time, is they're going where the evidence leads them. I don't know if any of you saw, but last night, Barb posted on our Public Stephen Avery project to, again, say that, you know, her family is innocent. And I then ended up banning her because she knows the rules. Everybody who goes on Facebook knows the rules. You can't block an admin or a moderator. And Barb had me blocked, so I couldn't. I can see her posts if I'm on a Stephen Avery project, but I can't see them if I go on as me, and that's the rule. Well, I'm happy to debate it with her. The last time she came on Stephen Avery project to post things, I would jump on her. I've got no issue doing that. Why is my phone not? Is my sorry. But Stephen doesn't care who did it. He wants the person who actually did it to pay for that crime, not him or Brendan, who are innocent. So if that is leading to family members or extended family, then that's where it leads. Why should Stephen and Brendan be in prison for something somebody else did, even if it's family? So, and then I got a kick out of, because I was sent the screenshot from multiple people of Barb posting all over the place saying, I'm going to say this only one time. And then, you know, it's posted everywhere and anywhere. And she's been saying it for years. My family is innocent. No, they're not. Because why won't Bobby talk to Kathleen? Why is Bobby okay to talk to the state, who put Brendan in prison for something he didn't do, but won't talk to Kathleen, who is the only person who can get him out? So that's a little backwards. And if you're innocent, what does it hurt to talk to Kathleen? It's not even like you don't want to go talk to a police officer, because we see what they can do when you talk to them. So, you know, don't talk to police. You'd be talking to a defense attorney. That's not going to put you in prison with what you say. So, whatever. Abby is hi from UK. MaM2 left me brokenhearted. Yeah. Amanda says, amazing. I've often wondered why the Hallback family hasn't also tried to help Zellner out, because you can obviously tell by all the evidence and everything that Stephen is innocent. I'm always confused by that as well, because and we talk about this all the time, that you would think family would want who really did it, unless family's involved. So I do not think that Ryan Hilgas is the killer, but I have thought for the longest time that he was part of the cover-up. And I think Scott Blodorn was too, and probably Michael Hallbach. Because when you look at the login sheets for the people who were on Avery property during the days that Manitowoc was there searching, Michael Hallbach is one of the people who signed in and out there with Ryan and Scott Blodorn. So, and I always say that I believe that they thought at that time, originally when this stuff all happened, that Stephen did it. And they were afraid that Stephen would get off because of the depositions that were taking place with Manitowoc for framing him the first time. So they wanted to make sure that he couldn't get off. And is it now that they're just going to take this to their graves, that they know that that Scott and Michael Hallback, Scott Blodorn, Michael Hallback, and Ryan Hilgas planted the car and got her day planner out and all that? So is that the reason why? But you would still think they would want to know. I don't know. Pam said, finished last night, then went to bed with a headache from stress. Yeah, I got a headache currently. Kim says, how are Ma and Pa Avery? Have you talked to them since part 2 came out? I do have Dolores's phone number, and I have thought about reaching out to her to make sure that she's okay. Or even calling her and telling her I'll take a trip up there and have another visit. But with her having her recent surgery, I think it's best if I just stay out of that for now. Next time Stephen calls me, I'll ask. And then I'll update y'all on what Stephen had to say on that. So, but for right now, I'm just, I'm sure they're getting mobbed right now by fans, and Carla likes to make the salvage yard a tourist spot and get all her wacky minions to go over there. So I'm sure that's being done too. So I'm going to give her space. I have no idea why my phone is not. It keeps going off, but I'm not getting, none of my sounds are going off. I don't know. Anyway, I guess I'll put it in front of me so I can kind of pay attention to it to see. Rita says, Barb can't stop Amy from writing him though, right? Amy would have to send a letter under a fake name, because Barb has instructed Brendan not to read any letters that come from Amy or I. So like the last letter Brendan sent me also included, or actually I got 2 things from him the same day. And so one was his letter telling me that he wouldn't be talking to me anymore. And then the second one was the last letter I had sent him, not even opened. And he told me his mom instructed him not to read my letter and to just send it back to me. So if Amy puts a different name on there, it might get to him. But then it also goes, but why? We've gone back and forth on should we reach out to him or not, or at least Amy. But would that really be any benefit to Brendan at this right now? Maybe she could just do a general thing, just saying, I'm still here for you. And if you need me, let me know. And don't say anything other than that. But, he believes in his mom. And his mom has made the only contact Brendan can have is with those freaky fans. Who like worship Brendan and they treat him like a baby and baby talk with him. And then there's how Barb is always trying to set Brendan up with the supporter, like this is his girlfriend now, and that makes Brendan happy. It's weird. I don't know. So I don't know if she'll write him or not. Robbie says, I can't believe how these cops and lawyers even thought they could get away with it. It's shocking. I mean, yeah, they got away with it the first time, but you would think really people would have to be looking at this seriously when it's done to Stephen a second time when the depositions are going on at that moment. It's just, I guess it's that blue line, right? Matthew says, how is it possible that the coroner is banned, but the detectives from Manitowoc were there helping? Yes, Matthew, because that's something we talked about in the last live. So there is another case, the Ricky Hostetler case. Is that how you say that name? So he was a teenage boy who was walking at night and was hit and run. And then it was reported, and Manitowoc responded to it. But see, a lot of them had been up the road at some bar for some, party thing. And so a cop or sheriff or whatever who had been drinking and rushing to that scene ran Ricky over a second time. And they keep that under wraps there. So then when that coroner was at that scene, they instructed her immediately to make sure it was in her report that the boy was already dead before he was hit the second time by Manitowoc. And she said, if that's what the evidence shows, that's what she'll say. So letting them know, so they know she's not going to play ball. She's not going to just follow the blue line. She's going to follow the truth. So now when this case happens, she's banned from the scene, even though she's elected by the people. She's a freaking coroner. So, so we've known about that for a while, but now in part 2, we see just how bad it got for her. And I feel horrible for what was done to her. And I know some people want to, because I've seen some people rip on her, and I get wanting to rip on her. I do. But look what they did to Stephen and Brendan. And yes, you could say, but if she standing up could have helped them. It probably wouldn't have at that time, because it just wouldn't have. Are they really killing people? Manitowoc, so, there's that theory that Manitowoc is part of what happened to Teresa to get rid of Stephen. And then there's this other case, Carmen Bootwell. And then there's Ricky Hostetler. And then what else is there? So I get her being afraid, so, and she's only one person and going up against that. And so I don't fault her for that. But she did try to testify. So she did the best she could. Kim, I felt so bad for Brendan. It breaks my heart. I didn't see Barb's post, LOL. She should be better served to keep quiet, especially right now. We've told that to Barb forever, even back when Amy and I were part of it, that Barb needs to step away. And actually Barb wasn't on at the start. It was Brendan's brother Blaine and his wife that set up the page for Brendan. That existed before anything else. And Barb wasn't a part of it. And somebody else had a Making a Murderer page that became huge. And then Carla and her minions got their hooks into it. And after this woman who started it had built that community, and I can't remember how many people it had, but it had a lot of people. It had more people than they have in those groups today. And Carla and her minions went after the woman because, they want to be top dog. So what that woman ended up doing is turning over the power of the group to guilters to just wipe it out. So then that's when Carla started a new group that she used the word project in it, because now Stephen Avery Project, it was then and is still the biggest Making a Murderer group. And so she wanted to try and tie her group to that, because all Carla cares about and Barb are numbers. You know, they want to, you know, make their group so big. So Barb has been told by multiple people, including Steven, to get off the internet. And she doesn't listen. Amber says, can we talk about Bobby's computer and the disk they just sent over? We can talk about anything you guys would like. And just so you know, too, I don't scroll down until I've read and answered whatever is there. And if too many, if a lot of stuff comes in, it'll start booting it up. So I might miss people's stuff. So just bear with me. So, yeah, so what we saw in Making a Murderer 2, which, of course, we already knew, that Barb once is lying, because we see photographic evidence that Manitowoc took that shows the computer in Bobby's room, when they like to say it wasn't in Bobby's room and it was in the living room. It was in Bobby's room. And then Zellner has a way of putting things out that make it easier for non-legal people to understand, you know, and with there being so much that goes on with this case, you know, she really made it so I was able to understand the DVDs versus the CD. And so that CD, the one CD that was withheld from the defense, the important thing is that's the one that is easily readable. So the DVDs, you needed that program to be able to open it and see it, where the CD, it's all right there. So that's one of the things that are important. Then the next thing that's important is Sweaty Sweat Sweat kept referring it to as Brendan's computer. And since he was not using Brendan in Stephen's trial, because they originally wanted to use Brendan to testify against Stephen and to say that he saw Stephen do this and that, you know, and because Brendan would parrot, say what the investigators wanted him to say, and then he would recant it right away, they couldn't trust Brendan on the stand, that he would be pushing the narrative that the state wanted. So since there was no Brendan involved in Stephen's case, when Sweaty Sweat Sweat is sending to Strang and Buting, oh, this is Brendan's computer, they didn't think twice about it. Now, whose fault is that? Strang and Buting's. Why would you ever trust Sweaty Sweat Sweat? Why? You know, you should be looking at everything. So that again goes to Zellner's ineffective assistance of counsel. Strang and Buting fucked up, point blank. You know, I know when we saw them in part one, me and, you know, lots of other people were all enamored with Strang and Buting. You know, I went and saw them several times when they went out on their tour, and you know, I defend them a lot in saying that, you know, they did the best they could. They didn't have the millions of eyes that are on this case now due to part one. And they weren't paid a whole lot. And, you know, so they had limited money and resources. But I know from talking to Stephen, he would tell them to do something, and they didn't listen to him. You know, and, you know, I know Stephen is this, you know, guy from the sticks and the low IQ, but you should have listened to him. He's your client, regardless. So, and why you would ever believe the state, especially Sweaty Sweat Sweat, would be honest about anything. You saw what he did for that press conference and coming up with, and I swear this tale that he's saying that Brendan did is probably something from his own fantasies, because, you know, he's a sexual deviant. So that computer, they can play semantics all they want on it's this person's computer, it's that person's computer. The stuff that's on there got put on there when Bobby Dassey was the only one home and access to it. Period. Point blank. End of story. I don't care what room in the house it was in. I don't care who paid for it. Bobby was the only one home. That computer had a password on it. And Steven's not going to go into Barb's house and use her computer to surf for nasty porn when he had his own computer and internet and lived alone since Jody was in jail. So Bobby put that shit on the computer. Brody says, that whole we found DNA on the hood latch and the bullet, straight bullshit. And then Kathleen did her testing and ballistic test, and it came back that it was place is just mind-boggling. Yeah. So that was the first time I've seen it said that the bullet could have just been pulled right out of that it was stuck in the garage wall. And something to know about Steven's garage, and you can look in the photos either here or on Stephen Avery Project from the couple times that I visited the salvage yard and I took pictures of the garage. So like even the picture, that's the cover picture for Gossip, where you see Steven's trailer. I'm looking at it on my other screen over here. I took that picture. That garage is made out of like particle board. You know, it's thin stuff. So yeah, so now you see that there's no blood on there. There's no bone. They're finding wood, red paint, cotton fibers. So absolutely could have been a chapstick, put a Q-tip across it and wipe it on the bullet. And then the hood latch. The hood latch, we already know, and I don't know why people don't talk about this. They had also taken Steven's Grand Am, and one of their lab people admitted that they were in Steven's Grand Am wearing gloves, and then they went to the RAV4 and opened that latch. So they could have, it's cross-contamination right there. So that he could have picked something up touching in Steven's car and then touched the back of the fucking RAV4. Sorry, language, but you guys should know by now if you're in there. So everything that Manitowoc has done is suspect. Even look at Culhane, being told, put her in the house or garage. And then if you didn't know, Culhane was a part of Steven's original case. And it was sent to her, the DNA to test when, all that stuff started, to test this DNA, the stuff that eventually freed Steven, and she put it off for months to test it. And then she contaminated shit because she was talking to lackeys in there and contaminated stuff. Oh, they're bumbling idiots. Kim says, I think Bobby won't talk to KZ because the state didn't prosecute him for the stuff on the computer if he would be their key witness against Steven. Right. Yeah, I'm sure that's been used against him. His porn should put him in prison. Barb was busted with a large amount of pot because I don't even know if Scott was a dealer, but it was Scott's pot that she was busted with. So that went away all at that same time. So stuff's being used against them as well. Sam says, Steven's speech at the very end was heartbreaking. He's so kind-hearted. He just wants the truth to come out. And just what he said at the end of episode 18, I'm just a human being that got kidnapped. It's heartbreaking what was done to them. Yeah, okay, Brody, I was about to read yours and now it just got booted, so I can't. And somebody else's was underneath it and I can't get up there. Sean says, let's not forget the computer was in Bobby's room. Barb denies it, denies it with it right in MaM2 episode 8 at 49 minutes. Good for you that you did that. And as recently as 11:18, he lied to police and said it was in the living room. Right. Their stories keep flip, flap, flap, flip. Yeah. Connie says, hey there, I never get notified when you go live. I just happen to catch it. There is something that you can click so you do get notified. I'm not knowledgeable on that, so maybe somebody can post that. And a bunch more of your comments just got wiped from me, so I wasn't able to read it. And I don't read when you guys reply to each other, because I figure you're just having a discussion together and I don't need to get in the middle of your discussions. Abby says, do you know how KZ makes her income if her cases are pro bono? Her cases are not pro bono. Stevens is. So she does have some cases, like another one that I advocate for, Kent Pellegrini here in Illinois. He pays. And he pays a lot. And then when she does get these guys freed, and then she also represents them when they sue for their damages, she gets a percentage of that. Kim says, thanks for checking on Stephen's parents and letting us know they're so fragile and I feel so bad for them. Yeah, it's when you see Alan choke up, that really gets me. Kim says, Amy can use my name if she wants to check on Brendan. Well, thanks for the offer, Kim. Connie says, sadly, Brendan does not understand his mom does not have his best interest. I know, but she's been the one constant in his life. Barb has always gone to visit him. I have no doubt that she loves Brendan. She does. But, you know, this Sophie's choice of letting Brendan rot to save Bobby, and now Barb's excuse has been, you know, well, Bobby's got 2 kids. I don't care that Bobby has 2 kids. Stephen had, what, 5 kids? Has 5 kids? Is it 4 or 5? They were taken away from him. Does anybody care about that? That he lost his children? No? And Bobby has a wife who has a job. They have a home that's paid for. It's not like the kids are going to be on the street. And I think it would be better if those kids weren't living with a killer. Lisa says, what's your take on how Scott's personality appeared on Making a Murderer 2? I found it to be realistic and true, because you were able to see both sides. Like when I did a live out of their home back when I was friends with them, and Scott gets choked up and talking about Brendan, I felt bad for him. I even wrote an article at one point saying that Scott was innocent because I was snowed. I bought it. You know, we have since pulled that article off, knowing what we know now. But then I've also seen him snap. I've heard him yell at Barb. I've heard him yell at Amy. He's never yelled at me. And I actually called him the last time there was a chance that Brendan may go free. And we weren't speaking, you know, so things had already gone bad. But I know the first time that Brendan was possibly getting out, and there had to be this whole plan in place on how you're going to keep him safe. And, you know, he had to have the checked-in place that he was going to live, and therapists and all this stuff. Amy and I were a part of that plan. And the thing that I'm always most concerned about is keeping him away from the press and keeping him away from stalker weirdos. I'm somebody, I do a lot of protests. I've been assaulted many times by men at protests. I'm good with that. I'm happy to be frontline. And so I called, it was funny because I called Scott, but Barb answered the phone. So I don't know if Scott still had me programmed into his phone, so it came up, it was me, and that's why Barb answered. So Barb answered, and I said, Yeah, it's Jax. I'm calling for Scott, because I didn't want to talk to Barb, because I knew the person in charge would be Scott. And so then when Scott got on the phone, I said, I just want you to know I'm still here. And if Brendan gets out and you need somebody, I'm happy to help. And he said, I can take care of my family myself, I think he said. And then he would just be quiet. And I said, well, I'm taking it that you, by your silence, that you don't want to talk to me. And he said, not really, no. And so I said, all right, and hung up. So, but I found it that's the real Scott. You were able to see both sides, where he's all sad and it seems like he cares. And then you hear him talking to Steven on the phone saying he's gonna, I fucking hate you and gonna put you in the ground. All right, okay. Amanda says, why does Bobby Dassey hate his uncle so bad? Here's what I was told by family back when I was talking to everybody. Everybody other than Steven's parents hate Steven. Hate him. They were happy to be rid of him. I was told that Chuck and Earl don't want to split the yard with Steven. They want that all to themselves. They want Steven cut out. That Steven has always been like the favorite. And so all the other siblings are resentful of that. And so, when Steven was in prison that first time for those 18 years, nobody but his parents came to see him. Family would tell press they think Steven was guilty. So Steven sat in prison for 18 years and only saw basically his parents. That's it. So when he got out, oh, look, they're all there. They're ready to, yay, hold his hand and walk with him. And this is all great. Well, then the family just wants that $36 million. So now they have to be nice to Steven because they want a cut of that. Steven wasn't treating them very nicely because Steven is still harboring the grudge he has against them that they let him sit in prison for 18 years and didn't give a fuck about him for those 18 years. Not only, again, that they just let him sit there, they would say to people that he's guilty. So I have no issue with him treating them like dog shit when he gets out, because that's what they did to him. But they're going to eat that shit and say, thank you, sir. May I have another? Because they want his money. Because one thing about Steven is, because he will talk to me about Carla and Barb and all this, and, that he wants nothing to do with them. But he's also not going to completely cut them off because they're family. He still has that loyalty because there is that blood there. And that's how, Carla likes to try and manipulate it, because she'll never be 100% cut off. Steven wouldn't speak nicely to the Dassey boys. I think he was only really nice to Brendan. And so he would say things to Barb like, these boys are going to amount to nothing because they were lazy and this or that. So the boys didn't like him either. Connie says they want to keep him mentally below average so he does not catch on. Yeah. Rita says maybe all the supporters can include a sentence in the letters they send him stating how wonderful you guys are and how much you truly support him. I'm not going to say no to, if anybody wants to speak on mine and Amy's behalf and say that, we are true supporters, go for it. But just know by doing that, you then may get banned. So, know that going in that you may, so if you're somebody who regularly hears from Brendan, you might not hear from him again. You might go on the naughty list. Patricia Ann says, when Bobby was in the witness box giving evidence, Steven must have thought, what the hell are you on about? Steven must have had doubts about Bobby and Scott. Yeah, and something that was in one of Zellner's most recent filings was that Steven says he saw Scott at that trailer that day earlier So Scott had to have been there with Bobby earlier that day that Teresa showed up there. So, and hi, Christy. Yay, Christy's here, who could, if you've got need links to stuff for Christy's your girl. Amanda says, since the coroner from Part 2 resigned 6 months after the case, she said, whoever the coroner is now, have they done the same thing to recent ones where they don't allow them to do their job? I don't know, but something I bring up all the time is we've got the midterms November 6th right around the corner. And if you're in Manitowoc County or in Calumet County, be looking at who's running for office there and see if you can get them out. Another thing, if you're in Wisconsin, get Scott Walker out as governor, because he won't pardon Stephen, and maybe the person running against him will. And then wherever you are all around, well, I guess I'll say the world, because a lot of places have elections, you need to be looking at who's running for office, and you need to be looking at the entire ballot. Sorry, political hat on now, because every position means something. So you need to be looking at who's running for state's attorney, which would be like sweaty sweat. And, so who's running for your attorney general, all that. It's important that you get people who are going to be fair and true in office, not people like Scott Walker and, even sheriff that Wiegert, right? Is Wiegert the one that just got elected sheriff up there? So pay attention to your elections, not just presidential years. So Carrie is saying she would have gone to jail too, I'm sure, talking about the coroner. And then Christy says she was scared, and I don't blame her, the coroner. Jerry says Barb's comments are going to come back and haunt her, like some of her posts being in motions. Well, that's something also that I do, and I'm sure many other people do. I send stuff to Kathleen, so when you all send me a screenshot of something, I then forward it on to Kathleen, and it's always, I assume Kathleen already knows, and I'm not trying to do her job for her, but there is so much. So in case it's not something that got her way, here it is, so, and Kathleen has people everywhere. I'm sure she has people that are even in this group, in gossip. People are everywhere watching everything. Connie says, did they possibly have 2 computers? No. Not 2 that were working. No. I know it's been said at one point they had a PC and a laptop, but at this time, all they had was that PC. Amanda says, I'm pretty sure 2 computers would have been mentioned by now. Rita says, Carla just started another new group, oh my God, where she states the discussion of Bobby and Scott theories are acceptable, just not in the main group. I joined it so much so could read posts. Need to stop with all the freaking groups. Jesus. And also, Stephen has told her, Stephen wants his name off of anything Carla does. So even when she has things, the Avery Dassey project, he doesn't want her representing him, period. She's been told and told and told and doesn't listen. She's in for a world of hurt when Stephen gets out, because she can't just bully her way around, because Stephen ain't going to tolerate it. And when I talked to Stephen last week, it was funny. I haven't said this before. So he said he was calling his mom because he wanted to check in on his mom to see how she was doing, because she just got home. And Carla answered the phone. And he said that Carla then tried asking him questions, and he said, put grandma on the phone. So he was having none of it to talk to her. Just give the phone, didn't want to talk to her. So, but I'm sure she'll never report on that one. Oh, Stephen wouldn't talk to me today, just wanted to talk to Dolores. Kimberly said, I love watching Kathleen work. I'm all ready for MaM3. I'd watch this every day. Well, and there's so much to cover. I'm sure their B-roll could be multiple seasons. And I said I like that she's looking at everything and that she's involved in it, you know. And I don't think she's doing that, or I know she's not just doing that because of cameras following her. And I stated this in the last live we did, but there was a case here in Illinois that she represented, the Riley Fox case, where the father was accused of, so the father, Kevin Fox, was accused of killing his young daughter. And so Kathleen got, from a farm or whatever, a dead pig that would be about the size and the weight of Riley Fox, to throw it off the bridge into the water to see what would happen to it, where it would float to, all that, and Kathleen was a part of that, so she is, and I don't even know how long ago the Riley Fox case was, but yeah, so she's been doing this for a while. And so I like that. I like to see how involved she is, and she's looking at everything. Amanda says, opinions of all in here. Do you guys feel with this case being as publicized as it is will harm this case or have the opposite effect? Well, Making a Murderer absolutely helped them in that, especially in Stephen's case, it got him representation, because before Making a Murderer, Stephen was representing himself, had no money, had no means. Brendan was represented by Stephen Drizzen and Laura Nyrider. And they also represented Damian Eccles from the West Memphis 3 case. So Brendan had good lawyers for him. It was Stephen who for years and years had no one. So it got him Kathleen. And even though this process takes so long, and, it still could be years until they're free. This is easy for me to say, but at least it's getting their story out, and they're able to have supporters, so they have people they can call, or letters they can get, or visits they get. And the majority of people, believe in their innocence. So while that wouldn't be good enough for me if I was stuck in prison, it's still something. So I believe it's benefited them. And the thing that's hard is there are so many other cases just like this that don't get this kind of attention, so then don't get this kind of help. And so that's what some of Kathleen's other cases are dealing with right now, that I also advocate for. That, those cases are kind of getting shuffled aside to make room for Stephen's case. And, the families in those cases, I'm not going to say they don't care about Stephen, because they care about everybody who's wrongfully accused and, want the innocent free. But they feel it's not fair to their loved ones that their case isn't being worked on as much, because Stephen's case is so big. So it has helped Stephen, but it's hurt others. Kimberly says, no, I think Making a Murderer show will help get Stephen. Michelle says, hi, Jax. What did I miss? I just got in. Just going over the people's questions and comments in here. So nothing new, just I was home from work and my boyfriend's still at work, so I have a little bit. Connie says, Stephen has been through the system honestly enough to know what to ask for in his cases. Well, he's done a lot of research and still does. And it's something I joked with him on one occasion, that he had said that Kathleen was having him look up stuff. And I told him that she should pay him, just joking with him, going, if you're being a law clerk, you should get paid for your time. Audrey says, sweaty sweat makes me sick. Not involved with the case anymore. When he comes out of a hearing, he has a creepy smile walking up to reporters. He's just loving the fame. Yeah. Every time I hear his voice, just his voice alone is creepy and sounds like a pedophile. He sounds like he's trying to get a kid to, I've got a puppy, come into my car and pet my puppy, or you want some candy, little boy. He's gross. And the one article I wrote, and I have the picture somewhere. I'm going on. It's my articles are all on Free Brendan, and they've been here at some point too. But in one of my articles that I'm trying to pull up on my other screen right here, I have the picture. Yeah, there it is. Can I just copy this image? Get off of here. Can I just paste it in here? I'm not. It's not putting the image in there. All right, well, here's the article. And you can see how far behind him. Why aren't you letting me paste? There you go. How far behind I was from him in line to get into one of Brendan's court dates. Okay, so that's somebody replying. Another reply to somebody else. Connie says Bobby is a twisted individual. There's no doubt what he was searching is twisted. Amy, my boyfriend Jeff, and I were discussing this morning. Yes, we know teen boys will look up porn. And there's nothing wrong with that. This wasn't porn he was looking up. This is sick. Jerry says, I have a question. All that stuff donated for Brendan's release, what happened to it? Is Barb and Scott using it, or is it in storage, etc.? Are you talking about like the stuff you saw on MaM2, the TV, and there was a video game system and all that? That's sitting in that room that you see on MaM2, waiting for Brendan to be released. As far as I know, it's not being used. That it is just sitting there. But I don't get why you would get that, buy that stuff until he's out. And I know Amy was actually with Barb on one of the shopping sprees they did. And we're going and spending the supporter money to buy this stuff for Brendan. I didn't get it then, and I don't get it now. But I do believe this stuff is just sitting there. Actual stuff. But Barb has gone through Brendan's money. I believe his money is gone. Kathy says, as Buting said, KZ team does not have the luxury to make errors. Yeah. Michelle says, and how he could not get DNA sweat that was on the handle that KZ showed. It was not. That was shocking. They would do that, and the courts believed him. Yeah, and Kathleen, I know she's brought the key or a key in for Stephen, would have him hold it and let go and hold him, let it, and all that, and nothing transferred. Just, Michelle says, I think the bones are from an animal. Well, this is where we get into the Carmen Bootwell case. That, I've just got so much going on that I don't follow the Carmen case like I should. But Carmen is a distant relative of the Hallback family. And though the thing about the bones is, from all the testing they've done, there's never been any testing that has said those are Teresa's bones. The only testing says that it is similar to the female line in Teresa's mother's family. So that's Carmen Bootwell. And Carmen is somebody who looks similar to Teresa, age, all that. And she died of an alleged drug overdose at the same time. And the family wasn't able to get her body. And a whole bunch of craziness stuff was happening. And then, was it Manitowoc that even then paid for her to be cremated? So suspicion is the bones that have been found are Carmen's, not Teresa's. Curiouser and curiouser. Connie says, as soon as she can test that, she will know the source of the DNA. San says, I was really impressed with how much Stephen has learned about the law. I know he has to do so much of his own legal work because he had no choice. I'm so proud of him. I think he can really help others when he is released. Love him. Yeah, it would be really good for Stephen to help others. I know that's something that Kent Pellegrini, one of Kathleen's other cases, that's something that he wants to do. Kent is somebody who was never in trouble ever. And so when this all happened to him, he had no clue how booking and court and this level and that level, he didn't know any of that. So he wants to be able to help people going forward on this is what's going to happen and they're going to do this and that, so and I do know the wrongfully accused, the people who have been freed have formed their own little community. And so they all, when they get these big judgments, they all like take a portion of that and put it in this growing pot of money that they then use for when the next person joins their horrible club of people freed. Well, it's not horrible that they were freed, but it's horrible that they were in there, to help them get on their feet, because you don't get out of prison and just walk into a whole bunch of money, because as you can see from even Stephen's case, he had been out for 2 years and the depositions were just starting. So in those 2 years, you saw in part 1 that he was living in an ice shanty for a time, because he had no place to live and had no money. So they don't walk out of prison and yay, we're millionaires, So the other wrongfully accused people are helping them, but it's all it's not something that's publicized, but they do look out for each other and help each other. Kimberly says, I'd love to just be in Kathleen's office and just watch her work. She is awesome. Well, that's something I took Amy and her daughter Jessica to while they were here for the weekend, because Kathleen's office is right by my house. And they wanted to go to a store and then they wanted to go to eat. And so Kathleen's office is literally on the way there, on that road. We would have to pass her office. So I took them to her office and we went up to her office. They weren't in that day. And we just took a couple pictures, outside of her office. And when I first got involved in Making a Murderer, when I first watched it, I didn't have Stephen Avery Project or anything at that time, or hadn't Mend Any Family or anything. I had emailed Zellner's office and I said, I live right by your office and whatever I can do to help. Do you need me to go pick up your dry cleaning? Do you need me to go get the office coffee? What can I do to help? I didn't hear back on that one, but I'm totally with you on there. Danielle says, I can't believe what they did to the coroner. I know that is huge, and I feel for her. And when Amy and I were watching it too, I'm like, oh, I want to send her flowers. I feel so bad for that woman. Ashley says, what's everyone's feeling about Bobby and Scott? I felt they were guilty from the first one. I did too, but I flopped and flipped. So I was Scott and Bobby. I was Ryan Hilgas. And I was also George Zipperer. So, and like in each one of those, I can make a theory that fits, just a theory though. And it's different than like how Barb is defending Scott and Bobby by saying all this stuff that's in MAM2 is just Zellner's theory. No, they're not, honey. That's evidence and facts. It's not a theory. What I say is a theory, because it's just me finding a way that things fit. So I could make a theory for each one of those that I had said how it could fit, that it could be one of them. And just the more stuff that Kathleen filed, the more everything was pointing to Scott and Bobby. So, and Stephen has told me Making a Murderer 2 would make no doubt on who did it, that all the evidence is right there and all the pieces fit. And now we've watched it and it's saying Scott and Bobby. Audrey says, who was it that had seen the blood in the sink? I thought someone else knew and saw the blood in the sink. You're right. I do remember somebody else saying something about the blood, but I don't know who. Patricia says, what about the lorry driver? The lorry driver. Different country. I love when stuff like that happens. Passing Teresa's RAV4 and telling Colburn. What a shocker. Well, those were in Kathleen's recent filings. And don't forget, his brother Blaine said he saw, when he was on the school bus, that he saw Bobby driving Teresa's car. So, but again, this is all the pieces fitting where this guy saw the car by the dam in that cul-de-sac on Cuss Road. And then when he's in the gas station, a cop comes in, and he had just seen the poster that had been on the flyer on the window, and so tells him. Then he tries to tell Scott. God, just imagine that guy when you're watching Making a Murderer years later, and you're like, that's the fucking guy I told. And then it puts everything into place too, with Colburn calling in the plates of that vehicle. How do you know those plates unless you're looking at it? And he is the one, knock it off, talking to my dog, that said what the make and model of that car was. And then the next day, search party finds it at the salvage yard where Sturm of God was able to walk directly there. Bullshit. Danielle says, I felt so bad for the coroner. Her tears seemed real. Yeah. I feel really bad for her. Connie, okay, I want to talk about this truck driver who reported seeing the RAV to Colburn and Scott. From my understanding, Scott now owns this property. The house he and Barb bought the day Brendan was sentenced, right? They had claimed bankruptcy and then bought that house. Whatever, is right by there. And his trailer, where Scott was living at the time, is right over there too. It's all so close. It takes a while to get to if you're driving, because you got to take the roads and you got to go around all those fields and the quarries and such. But if you're just jogging through the field, nice straight shot there. Maybe after the election, because I have to work every weekend through the November 6th election, I'll go back up there and do more videos because I've done before where I have videoed from the bus driver, but to prove there's no way the bus driver could have seen Teresa taking pictures of the car. And I recorded walking the Pam Sturm Path of God to prove there's no way she could find the car as fast as she did. So maybe I'll go and I'll walk it and we'll time it and I'll show you how close all those things are to each other. The election's in 18 days, I believe. So if I forget, somebody remind me. Or I don't know if I'd go up there on a weekday, because I'd want my boyfriend to go with me because he's got a couple of drones and maybe he could fly drones over it so you could see it like that. Because it's only like a 2.5 hour drive for me, so it's not far away. Cherry says, knowing what you know of Barb, is she easily manipulated? Like, could Scott and Bobby control her? She's not easily manipulated. Barb's a strong woman, and she does stand up for herself. I don't know if it's where I say a lot, you know, I'm a mom, and I call it, you know, it's just a typical mom thing that you choose your battles. So something might not be worth your time to fight it. There is something going on though there, and why she stays with Scott, because she did tell Amy and I once that she wanted to leave him. And she called, Amy and I were on our way home from Brendan's prison, and she called us. She and Scott were hunting, go figure. And so they're each in, you know, when you go hunting, it's a solitary thing. You don't typically go hunting deer together. So he's in his tree stand, wherever that is, and she was in her tree stand. And so it was the only time she was able to talk to us without Scott. Because also, as I'm sure you've noticed from Making a Murderer, it's not just because there were cameras filming. She always talks on speakerphone, and Scott's always got to be right there and listening to her calls. So it was the only time she was able to talk to us. And so we were driving back to my place from Bobby's. Bobby should be in prison. Brendan's prison. And she was saying she wanted to leave Scott. She had already talked to one of her boys about moving in with them. So something is keeping her there. And my belief is Bobby's the one that killed Teresa. Scott helped at some point, so he's a witness while being guilty as well, but that Bobby is the more guilty party, and that Scott uses that to hold it over Barb. So while that's manipulation, she's doing it to try and protect Bobby. You know what I mean? So it's not like she doesn't know she's being manipulated. You know what I mean? Am I making sense? Sharon says hi, and hi back at you. Amanda says, when Steve goes free, does that automatically mean that Brendan will be released also? If this is a dumb question, ignore it. Amanda, there are no dumb questions. No, it does not, because they were tried completely different. So there's another case of Kathleen Zellner's, Ryan Ferguson. There is a documentary on it called Dream Killer. So Google it and see if you can find it and watch it. I don't know where it's available to watch. So in that case, a man had been murdered in a parking lot. And I believe it was like 2 years after. They had no leads and didn't know who did it. And 2 years later, this boy, Charlie, right? Charles, went to the police and said he had a dream that he did it and that Ryan Ferguson did it with him. And so Ryan Ferguson was prosecuted on this other dude's dream. Ryan Ferguson always maintained his innocence. His dad, Bill Ferguson, is like, I've never met him. I guess I could be a groupie for Bill Ferguson if I ever met him. He's such a sweet man. And, you know, he's what you think a family member of somebody in prison who's wrongfully accused would behave, that Bill did everything he could to get his son freed, including hiring Kathleen. Kathleen freed Ryan Ferguson, and Charles is still in prison. So it doesn't automatically free Brendan. But if Kathleen is able to prove who actually did it, maybe it will help get Brendan a new trial. Or maybe it will become such a big deal that the state will just give up and let him leave. So, yeah, but it's, again, our system is stupid, because how are Stephen and Brendan prosecuted for the same crime, but there's two completely different methods on how it happened, and they were both prosecuted by Sweaty Sweat Sweat. So Stephen did it here and like this, and Brendan did it here and like that. Same crime, different scenarios. Christopher, I think the only way the guys will get out is if they get a pardon from a governor other than Walker or the federal law changes. Yeah, it's sad, but that's a big possibility, Christopher. Ashley says, new to the group here, but glad I'm not the only one who thought he was guilty. I think Bobby did it too. What about Ryan Hilgas? What did he have to gain from this whole thing about hiding the vehicle? My theory is that police convinced them that Stephen did this, but due to what happened to him, Stephen, in the Penny Bernstein case, that he would walk, that they would have a hard time getting a guilty verdict because of the first case, and they didn't have evidence that would for sure put him in prison. So that's how Ryan Hilgas became a willing participant in planting the RAV4 at the salvage yard to frame who they thought was a guilty man. And who knows what they have on Ryan Hilgas, because it seems to me like Manitowoc has something to hold over all of these people's heads, and so they go along with it, or something will happen to them. Danielle says, Stephen's case is under appeal. I read all court proceedings last night on CCAP. Yeah, I tell people all the time that you should go read stuff for yourself. There is a website called StephenAveryCase.org, and everything is there. So go read it for yourself. Don't just listen to me or Making a Murderer or whatever. Go look it up yourself. Kim says, I wondered about Stephen being the favorite. You just kind of get that feeling that all his siblings are only in this for what they can get. Barb has never been well liked. I don't know why. I don't know where that comes from. She's the only girl. I don't know if it's, because of the life of, having a salvage yard, that they really only cared about the boys that were doing that work. I don't know. I don't know if Stephen was the favorite prior to his first case, or if he became the favorite because of that. I do know in other cases that I advocate for, there becomes a sibling rivalry, and you'll have, when the parents are devoting so much time to this one who's in prison, the other siblings will get jealous and mad about it, that they're not getting the attention the other one is. So it's tough. Kim says, Stephen seems to genuinely care for all of them, but he has to be frustrated at their behavior towards him. Yes, because he'll tell me family is family, so when he and I will talk about the antics of Carla, he'll say, but she's family. So Sherry says, unlike others in the case, family, etc., besides Mom, Pa Avery, and Stephen, their stories never change. Right. So that's the thing. I go, it's easy to tell the truth because you lived it. So easier to remember. But when you lie, you kind of forget. Was the fire 3 feet high? Or was it 6 feet high? Michelle says, check Barb September 29 post on Facebook. I can't because I'm blocked. Angelica says, where do you read from? Angelica, if you're talking about case stuff, that would be StephenAveryCase.org. Connie says, the missing girls all close to their area that also match Brendan's computer search matches. I sent to KZ with a timeline. I don't believe in coincidence. And you're not the only one, Connie. One of the moderators at Stephen Avery Project fell down that rabbit hole for a little bit because she's convinced that this can't possibly be Bobby's only time. And so, yeah, that one where the sketch even has Bobby's a similar tattoo. Yeah. Mary says, I find it interesting in last night's live that most of the family really doesn't care for Barb. And making a murderer too seems like they are worried about her. While Dolores and Barb don't get along, there's still going to be that bond that these mothers lost their sons. So while Dolores because the family all hate Scott, have always hated Scott. There's nobody in that family that likes Scott. So that helps keep the divide. You know, so while Dolores might not approve of everything that Barb does in her life, like, you know, and a lot of moms have that with their kids, but there will be that bond that they've lost their sons. Connie says, many people wanting to send funds to Mom, Pa Avery, and Carla trying to take charge of it. Oh my God, you just make me freak out by hearing that. Many people not feeling comfortable with that. Some asked to send to KZ, and Carla kind of got snippy about that. Don't, please, people, do not send anything that it tells you where to send money. Don't, please don't. You can send money directly to Dolores. You know, all you have to do is Google the salvage yard, but I believe it's 12390 Avery Road, Two Rivers, Wisconsin. Send it directly to her. Put her name on it, send her a card, and send the money directly to Dolores. Don't send it to the salvage yard. Don't send it to Chuck or Earl. Send it to Dolores. When I went and visited Dolores a couple months ago, I brought her cash and handed her cash that went directly to her. I guess if you trust me, and I really hate saying this because people always accuse me of stealing money, you could get money to me and I'll make a trip up there and give it to them. If the only way you can do it is like PayPal money, that you can't send a check. I don't even have checks. Reach out to me privately and we'll think something out, or send it to Kathleen. You can go on Kathleen. Is it Kathleen T. Zellner? Send it to Kathleen. Even if you send it to Kathleen, if you send a check to her and mark in there, I want this to go to Dolores, she'll get it there. Just please, please, please don't trust Carla and don't trust Barb with money. Don't. Please don't. I would suggest too, if you want to send money to Brendan, send it to Northwestern, to Stephen Drizzen or Laura Nyrider. it kills me. And that's something that I discussed with Stephen on the phone, that I said, when the part 2 comes out, this is when we're going to be getting all this attention. It's going to be huge and people want to help. And then that's when the talk of money comes. And so Stephen had told me he was going to be talking to Earl about getting a bank account set up for him. And I told him to call me right away when it was done, or have Earl reach out to me, because Earl calls my boyfriend on occasion and talks to my boyfriend. So I'm like, so Earl has Jeff's number. You know, if Earl doesn't want anything to do with me, he talks to my boyfriend. So call him and tell him the information to deposit stuff straight into a bank account for Stephen. But even that worries me. Oh, it just all worries me. This money thing all worries me. And I know if you listen to Carla or Barb, they like to do the trying to say I stole money, which has been proven time and time again I didn't. Don't send it to Dolores, please. Even if it's meant for the salvage yard, send it to Dolores. You know, do me that favor, please. Thomas says, how do you solve a murder case without a coroner's report? Yeah, right? Patty says, making a murderer also got witnesses to come forward. Remember the guy that saw Teresa's RAV and texted Scott that he told Colburn? Excellent point, Patty, on that. Yeah. And so, and we've already talked about that too. So he wouldn't have come forward unless he had seen on Making a Murderer that it was fucking Scott Colburn, Andrew Colburn, that he talked to. So it is important to get this out there, because, and also I feel like, you know, she's tightening the screws, and maybe, you know, more people will come forward when you see what she has. Just says, do you think that KZ has some evidence that wasn't shown in Making Murderer 2? Yep. Not every time I talk to Stephen, he has said that Kathleen has more that she holds back and hasn't decided when to release it. If she releases it or she waits to drop it in court. So there's more that nobody knows except, and to be honest, I don't think Stephen knows. I think some stuff is kept from Stephen, because I know I talked to Buting. So when you see the one time when Brendan's case was in Chicago, and you see Buting walking into the building, I had talked to him afterwards, and I had brought Paul Kaluzinski with me, whose daughter Melissa is another one of Kathleen's clients, and he likes to go to other people's cases. He goes also to Kent Pellegrini's case as well. And so Paul and I were talking to Jerry Buting outside, and Jerry told me that, you know, they would keep stuff from Stephen because they didn't want him saying the stuff to people. So I'm sure Kathleen has stuff that she hasn't told Stephen either. Mike says, maybe I missed it, but did the prosecution ever explain why her blood was in the back if she was killed in the garage and burned right next to it? Well, they say, and I get confused by all that too, Mike, it's not just you. They have said that he had pulled the RAV4 into the garage and then loaded her body into that. And then by putting her in there, that's when the transfer happened. And then I guess he drove her to the burn pit. That the stuff you see on Making a Murderer does not do it justice on how close that burn pit is to that garage. So and in the pictures I've taken when I was there, you can see how much closer that actually is to it. And with it being that particle board garage, if it was a fire as tall as a garage, that particle board would have gone up too. So, yeah, so that's never made sense to me on why her blood would be in there. Why would she ever, but then also, then why are there these bones that are found out in these miscellaneous quarries too. You know, I suppose somebody could try and say that animals took it or something. I don't know. But, you know, human bones were found in multiple spots that nothing has ever been proven to be Teresa's. Just it is most likely to be a female in Karen Hallback's family, right? I wish Lynn was on here, because Lynn knows and not the evil bitch Lynn, good Lynn. She knows way more on that stuff than I. Thomas says, why would Manitowoc County Coroner resign? Because Manitowoc Police wouldn't let the coroner do her job. I'll correct you right there. It's not Manitowoc Police. It's Manitowoc Sheriff's Department. Manitowoc Police Department is a different entity, and they didn't do this. They didn't do any of this shit. It was Manitowoc Sheriff's Department. And the reason I always like to point that out, too, is when I was organizing the first June Manitowoc rally, you know, so now when you see all those whack jobs at the rally, I'm the one that organized that. And then Carla kicked me off like 3 days before then. The police were being extremely helpful. Manitowoc Sheriff's Department was the one that originally wanted me to pay $2,000 for a permit. They wanted me to get a $1 million insurance policy, all this stuff. So the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department was trying to fight me on being there. And so then I contacted the Wisconsin ACLU, who then got involved. And so then I no longer talked to Manitowoc Sheriff's Department. ACLU did on my behalf. And due to that, that is when ACLU had them see the light on the sidewalk is public property. I do not need a permit or permission to be on public property, and it is my constitutional right for a public demonstration as long as a peaceful protest. That is our constitutional right for a peaceful protest. And I can't tell you how many protests I've been a part of since then. I know my rights. So the police were really so great. The Manitowoc Police Department, where they were giving me a set area. Because, see, you're not supposed to be on the courthouse grounds. So when you see them posing for pictures on the courthouse steps, you're not supposed to fucking go there. You're supposed to be off the property. You know, so them doing that, that's breaking the rules. And I don't approve of that. I don't like that one bit. You know, I had negotiated and these were the terms. Just fucking follow the rules. And I get it. What Manitowoc Sheriff's Department has done to Stephen and Brendan isn't following the rules. But it's very simple. Stay on the fucking public sidewalk. But the thing that the police department was organizing with me is they were giving us a set section where we could set up chairs or tables or whatever, you know. So they were giving us a place that, you know, people who can't walk. And so the police department was great. It's the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department, who are a bunch of corrupt fucks. Kate says, why do they all lie so much about the computer, saying she had no internet and that it wasn't Bobby's computer when all of it has been proven otherwise? They just lie. Because there's no going back. You know, fake it till you make it. You know, just keep that lie going. Even though Barb herself contradicts herself constantly. You know, and another thing on why she shouldn't be on here, like the time when she posted that I talked to Bobby and he said he saw Teresa leave. Wait a minute. He testified that he didn't see her leave. So, just lie. Thomas says, Kathleen Zellner is proving that there are other suspects that should have been looked at for the murder of Teresa Hallback. Exactly. You know, because she showed a lot of stuff for Ryan Hilgast. So, and I'm not numbers person, but most time when somebody's killed, it's by somebody they know. So they absolutely should have been looking at her ex-boyfriend. They absolutely should have been looking at Scott Blodorn, her roommate, who she would have sex with, who was friends with her ex and her brother. They should have been looking at she had her own little side photography business where she would take boudoir photos. So she took sexy, racy photos of a married couple, and they then had a threesome. And then that man dumped his wife for Teresa. So, and please don't say this is me trying to ruin the victim's reputation, because I'm not. She was a single woman. Live your life the way you want. I am not looking down on her lifestyle, but those people should have been looked into. I know they were questioned a little bit, but, you know, they should have been looked at way more than they were. You know, Teresa lived a lifestyle that there could have been people who were upset. So, whatever. Heather says, someone is over your right shoulder looking in your window. And then somebody said, oh no, it's Ken Kratz. That's a Halloween decoration. Not real. Mike says, if it was Bobby and Scott, how did Ryan get the day planner? Because the car was abandoned there and locked, even though the cops could have, you know, Slim Jimmed it open. They got the spare key from Teresa's house. So that's, you know, so that miracle key that was found at Stevens was the valet key, was not the key that she uses. So they went there and got the key so they could get in there and move the car. And so Ryan Hilgas got the key and went over there, and they moved the car, and they found the day planner on the passenger seat. Lisa, I've always been on the fence on whether Teresa is alive, even though I know it's not likely. But the fact that we don't have her remains makes me wonder how anyone can be convicted of murdering her, period. Right. Well, because they say those are Teresa's bones. And also, something that nothing is covering is that jury was stacked against Stephen. They had two people on that jury that were affiliated with Manitowoc Sheriff's Department. And so the one guy who was a bully, when you see the famous picture, when you Google Stephen Avery and you see him in the orange, is he in the orange jumpsuit or in the white and black striped one? Now I can't remember which one he's in. But there's a female sheriff on one side of him and a male on the other. Well, that man's father, Carl Wardman. That man's father was on the jury, and he was a volunteer for Manitowoc Sheriff's Department. So there's also, if you Google Carl Wardsman, you will see a picture of him standing with a Manitowoc Sheriff's Department car that he drove around like a community service officer. And then there was also somebody else on there who's was married to somebody at Manitowoc Sheriff's Department. But there were two people on the jury who were there to say Stephen was guilty. So Stephen was never going to be found innocent on that trial if the only thing he could get would have been the hung jury, because the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department people that were planted on that jury would have made sure. Sharon says, what about the and now it just booted it so I don't see it. So it was you were asking something about the burn barrel and I didn't read the whole thing. So I'm going to guess you're asking something about Teresa's stuff being in the burn barrel. I don't know. Post again if you can so I can know what you're wanting to talk about. Abby says, when Andy Colburn calls the license plates, you can hear someone in the background say, here's the car. It's right after the lady confirms the plates belong to Teresa. Very creepy. You can Google that. It says the car's here. But people hear that differently. So Google that, or Christy or an admin can post a link in there so you can see that. Connie says, for your safety, please don't go alone. Oh, for going up there? Have I ever told this story? I know I just told Amy. And sorry, now while I'm telling this story, more of your posts might go up. When I went to go visit Dolores, I brought a friend with me. Well, it's because my friend and I, we were actually doing a protest in Milwaukee. And since Milwaukee is the halfway point for me to go to the salvage yard, I'm like, all right, I'll go the rest of the way. And I called Dolores in advance and told her I was coming. So she knew I would be there that afternoon. So we visited with Dolores, and then my friend wanted to see Steven's trailer. So I had asked Dolores, where's Chuck? You know, I was there on the weekend, and I was asking if Chuck was at Crivets, you know, since I go there a lot in the summer on the weekend. And she said he was home. And Chuck threatened me 2 years ago. When you go down to Steven's trailer, the only way to get back is you do this little loop that takes you, you know, by you're right by what was Barb's trailer during the Making a Murderer time, but Chuck lives there now, so I had to drive past that. And so we drove down there so she could take a picture of the trailer real quick. And then I was driving away, and Chuck has chihuahuas. The whole family loves chihuahuas. And the chihuahuas started following my car. And so I'm driving down Avery Lane and driving all the way down, and they kept following all the way down, these chihuahuas running after me. And then my friend wanted to take a picture with the big salvage sign at 47, you know, at the end of Avery Road and 47 there. So she got out, and I was going to take a picture of her, but then I could see. And so this again is going to show when Steven's saying he saw a car here and turning this way, I could see the car leave where Chuck's now leaving and starting to come down the road. And I'm like, oh shit, we got to go. Here comes Chuck. So we got in the car and left. Funny. Sorry for the people's things that got booted up while I told that stupid story. Jodeci says, agreed, Bobby done it, and the police officer is involved as well as Scott. Yep. Kelly says, I feel so bad for Brendan if it is Scott and Bobby, his own family. Me too. I really hope I say this. I'm a broken record. I hope he finds his way to Amy. Amy will take him in and protect him and love him. Cherry says, curious for the future as well. Does Wisconsin have a law where spouse doesn't have to testify against spouse? I think so. I think that's everywhere, but I don't know for sure. Dawn Marie says he may have her convinced that she will be in trouble with the law as well for not coming forward with this information sooner. True. Jodeci says the ex as well. Agreed. Dawn Marie says, do you think with all the new evidence that Kathleen has that Brendan can now get an attorney if someone chooses to represent him pro bono and just start filing the same kinds of motions as Kathleen is? Well, Brendan has the best attorneys that he could get. You know, Laura Nyrider and Stephen Drizzen will be there till the end for Brendan, and it is pro bono. Brendan doesn't have to pay for them. And I believe they're just waiting to see what Kathleen does now. Brendan's case is ahead of Stephen's. And Brendan actually has the tougher case, even though they have all this circumstantial, also known as planted evidence against Stephen. There's no physical evidence against Brendan whatsoever, but Brendan confessed. So that's what makes Brendan's case tougher. And we all know he was made to say it. If you're here, you have no doubt that he was forced to say those things. But that's why it makes it tougher for Brendan. Cherry says, Barb should be as active in helping her son's case like Bill did for Ryan Ferguson. I'm truly amazed that all she does is sit online and post and not spend time trying to get to the bottom of it. Right. Yeah. Because the thing that I say about the Avery family is they're not well liked in their town, and they never have been. You know, they're just seen as the junkyard people. And so, like for Barb and Carla, they've never had friends. They're desperate to have friends. And, you know, so Carla's feeling pretty good right now as being, you know, lead mean girl. And Barb being the only daughter and never really having females to be close to, is desperate to be close, you know, to have a good girlfriend. That's Amy and Barb bonded and were really, really tight. But then you could also see how Barb threw Amy away, and then there's somebody waiting to be next in line to, you know, be Barb's BFF. So, Jodeci says, just like Kathleen said, Scott lived right behind where her car was found and then moved to right across the road from where the RAV was found. Mm-hmm. Heather says, speaking of Sweaty McSweaterson, why is he holding press conferences in Chicago at the hearings? I know. And it was, the press is downstairs. And so when you come off those elevators are in like this hallway. I know I'm not showing you well. So the elevators are in this hallway, and then you have to turn this corner and go this way. So now you're walking straight into where they're all set up like this. And then to leave, you would be then going out this way. It's open to anybody to go up to that microphone and talk. Anybody could. I could if I want to. You know, I actually got stopped by the press. I can't remember if it's the first time or if it was the second time. They asked me if I was Hallback film. So, but Kratz wants to get on camera anytime he can. And if I was press, I'd be calling him out on how he raped women. Because no doubt about it, he raped those abused women by making them have sex with him to help them with their cases. That's rape. These women didn't willingly have sex with him. He raped those women. So I would be throwing that in his face. And then you notice the people who are actually involved in the case currently don't take the mic. But you saw Jerry Buting took the mic and Ken Kratz took the mic. Not Stephen Drizzen, not Laura Nyrider, not Kathleen Zellner was at those. You didn't even see her. She didn't want anybody to see her. She came and go like the wind, you know. She was not in the room. She was not in the courtroom. I know there was special rooms where you could watch and not have to be in there. So Kathleen, I'm sorry, I know I move so much. I'm so fidgety and can't sit still. She didn't want the focus to be her. But I totally understand her wanting to be there and see it for herself. I don't begrudge her that. I know some people will accuse her of trying to take the limelight, but she's not, because she didn't talk to anybody. You know, didn't want anybody to see her. Even you see when she's going to file for Stephen up in Manitowoc, where she's trying to, you know, she just wants to get in and out of the courthouse. And oh, that made me cringe when Kim Ducat, or however you say her name, the cousin of Stephen. And I know she loves Stephen and believes in his innocence and has been, I guess she would be who you would put next in line after Stephen's parents of actually caring about Stephen in this case. But trying to talk to Kathleen like that was brutal. That was cringeworthy right there. Jodeci says they throw this on Stephen over the thousands they owed him. Yeah. Broke County couldn't pay him for 18 years wasted, so they set Stephen up to avoid payment. Well, also the other thing, Jodeci, was the Manitowoc Sheriff's Department insurance company said they weren't liable to pay out this claim if it was rolled against them. So all those men were going to be personally responsible. Jerry says, I wish Brendan's father could take over those groups for him. He truly seems like he is genuine in regards to his son's innocence and doesn't post asking for money like others. I've only met Pete once. Pete is really sweet, at least in my one interaction with him. It's when I went to Barb and Scott's house and we did the Facebook Live where I acted as the moderator and asked some questions. And so on the couch was Scott, Barb, and Pete. And so before we went live, Pete had never done anything like that. And he was a nervous wreck and wasn't comfortable in doing it at all. The only reason he was doing it is because Barb asked him to do it. So then I made sure I asked him questions that I knew wouldn't make him uncomfortable. You know, so what does he miss most about his time, you know, that the time he used to spend with Brendan? What's the first thing he wants to do with Brendan? I would make sure I was looking him in his eyes and, you know, just trying to be nice and soothing to him, you know, that he's just a nice guy. And I know that Barb holds Brendan over him. Hold on, I have to let my dogs out. Come on. All right, so, but Pete could never take over the groups. He likes that there's all these supporters. He doesn't want to be involved in any of that. I wouldn't be capable of, you know, doing all that. Blaine and his wife are the ones that actually started it, but you don't ever see them doing anything either. So, Jodeci says, how do you feel about the blonde that was divorcing a cop and runs to Steven for fame? Am I the only one who felt she was only about fame? Lynn Hartman. So when Steven first started with her, I reached out to Lynn because she was getting severely beat up by Carla and her minions, because Carla doesn't like anybody she can't control, and she's not going to control Lynn. So, and Zellner just tweeted. I always tell Steven when I talk to him that his life is his life. I don't care who he's interested in romantically. So I didn't think Lynn was good, but it's not my business. And I didn't know exactly what she was up to. So I reached out to Lynn to be a support for her, because if she is who Steven wants, then I'm going to support that. So I wanted to make sure she was okay. And so Lynn and I would message, and then I was also messaging with her daughter. Can't remember her name now. It starts with a K, I think. And they seemed very nice. And then Lynn just totally flipped and is just this, yeah. So Lynn is evil. And Lynn has me blocked, by the way. So I can't see anything that Lynn posts, but I do get sent screenshots. She's somebody that's totally there to make money. And it's why, not why, one of the reasons I hate Dr. Phil is because Dr. Phil did that show with her, and Steven's not allowed to talk to press. He's not allowed to do talk shows. He can't do that stuff. And so Steven thought he was calling Lynn. He had no idea about the Dr. Phil show or any of that. He thought he was calling Lynn. And they had her phone forwarded for the studio. So when he called thinking he's calling Lynn, he's on air. So he was totally duped. Even when you watch those Dr. Phil episodes, at the beginning of it, it's she's all into Steven, and by the end, it's no, I won't marry him. And it's like, what? This is the same freaking episode. How do you go from one to the other? And they're buying you this wedding dress for you to put on for when you marry him and all. She's the worst. Catherine. Ryan Hilgas needs properly investigating. At CrimeCon last year, in a podcast I heard with Nancy Grace, oh, I hate her too, Fassbender admitted homicides are most often by someone with previous history with the victims, spouse, friends, girlfriends, etc. And also, is it true that Teresa rented house was next door to her family? Mm-hmm. And Ryan moved there after she went missing. Mm-hmm. And if they did live next door to each other, how come her parents took 3 days to report her missing? Mm-hmm. First thing, let me tell you about that CrimeCon. I had contacted them and told them it was fucking bullshit that they were putting Kratz and Fassbender and Nancy Grace, and they were not having somebody on there to tell the other side of the story. So how do you call yourself this CrimeCon and you're only showing that one side? So that's what Kratz complains about, making a murderer. That's what happened with CrimeCon. They did not have somebody from the opposite side there and was only having guilters there. I told them I'll fucking protest your CrimeCon. And that's when I did pull the, do you know who I am? You know, I own Stephen Avery Project. We have 130,000 followers. And that's just the people who click to like the page. We post something here and it'll be seen by over 1 million people. You know, we have a big reach. And I'm like, I'll fucking organize a protest of your stupid CrimeCon. But then I got busy with something else, so I wasn't able to do it. To do the protest. So, yes. So the house that Teresa lived in is actually on the family farm. But they're not right next to each other. It's not like if you live, you know, in a suburb or whatever, that your houses are that close together. They're spaced, I think it's like a quarter of a mile from one house to the other. And she's a 25-year-old girl. When you were 25, did you talk to your parents every day? So I guess that's me giving the parents the benefit of that, you know, not trying to, you know. And they had just seen her that weekend because it was like her grandfather's birthday party or something like that. So she's 25 years old, lives in her own place. That's like a quarter of a mile away from the main house. So that's why they didn't see them. But Scott Blodorn, but then again, no, Scott Blodorn said there'd be times that she'd just sleep somewhere else. So, and he's not her keeper. So, yeah. Heather says, are Carla and Lynn friends? Not currently, but I do see I'm being sent screenshots of the Carla and Lynn arguing, and that probably is just the means for them to be all friendly again. Carla's going to be friends with whoever gets her attention. Connie says, Carla was saying send it to the yard, then gave the home address, I think, at one point. You would need to address it to Dolores Avery. The address for the salvage yard and the address for Dolores is the same. They're all 12390 Avery Road. But address it to Dolores. Don't send it to the salvage yard. Let the money go to Dolores. Even if all Dolores is going to do with that money, if she hands it over to Chuck and Earl, that's her decision to do. I'm going to trust Dolores's judgment over Carla's. So send it to Dolores Avery, 12390 Avery Road, 2 Rivers, Wisconsin, 5 something 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 something. Jodeci Shepherd says, Lynn, that's the woman that got involved with Steven for fame, I swear. Yep. Cindy says, why can't Barb be trusted? Why can she be trusted? Everything she says is a lie. That's why she can't be trusted. Why can't she be trusted? She let Brendan be interrogated without somebody in the room with him. She did. She'll make excuses and come up with a lie after lie. She let him walk in that room and be questioned and was not there. The only time she was with Brendan is when she had them get them a free night in a hotel, to stay in a hotel for the night. Then she was there. So she cannot be trusted. We also know she has spent Brendan's money. Ask her to give you an accounting of all the money that's in that GoFundMe. And ask her to show you the bank account. Well, then she'll say it's not in a bank account. She's putting it in her safe. Give me a picture of it. Prove it. Prove you have that money, Barb. She can't be trusted. Connie says, someone suggested a lawyer to handle it and give the funds to Ma and Pa. Kathleen Zellner would do it. There's already a lawyer. So send it to Kathleen Zellner and say that this money is to go to Dolores and Alan Avery. She's not going to pocket it. San said she even sold them out on Dr. Phil. Yep. Sharon says, do you have any t-shirts I can buy, please? The Brendan Dassey one. Sorry, I get in so much trouble for this because I'm accused of stealing that shirt money. So I'm always leery to do that kind of thing because people are going to think I stole the money, and I didn't. And I have the screenshot saved even of when Barb admitted one day out of the blue that I gave her the money because I gave it to her in fucking cash. So I don't know about that. I don't know if I want to open myself up to that. Maybe I'll ask Kathleen. Jodeci said, Lynn was about fame. She sat in the car saying she knew she would be in season 2 with Steven, all to get her face on Making a Murderer. I know, it's disgusting. I knew I'd be on there as his girlfriend. Ugh. Sad she broke his heart. Connie said, KZ is a poker player. Play your cards when the time is right. Nobody better. Didn't word go around KZ examined Barb's garage, the whole deer thing, so info still has not come out about that. Right, because that was in her most recent filing, right? Where then there's even the picture of Barb with Bobby with the bloody deer in the garage. So what did Barb know and when did she know it? If that deer was intentionally cut up in that garage to try and cover Teresa's blood. Catherine says, my biggest issue is there is no mixture of DNA in the car. Steven's blood in front and Teresa's in the back, and never the two are mixed. As a trained CSI, that is something that raises massive red flags to me amongst the other things. Thank you so much, Catherine. I love having people who actually know this stuff to talk about it. And, I'm confused by a lot, like the key that was found in Steven's room, only having Steven's alleged DNA on it and not Teresa's. And Teresa basically drove for a living. So she did these Auto Trader. She worked for Auto Trader on Mondays. She was also trying to get those hustle shots, which, we now see on part 2 that set up appointment through Auto Trader, she gets $8. But if she gets this picture on her own and get this car sold, she gets $18. So it's well worth her time to then, like, if Bobby Dashley's going to flag her over for a hustle shot, she's making $18. But anyway, so she's driving around for those, plus her photography stuff when she's, doing boudoir shots at people's homes and stuff. She's driving all the time. That key is going in and out of her hand. Wouldn't some of her DNA be on that? But no, all you see is Stevens. Why is all you're seeing is Stevens? It's because they wiped it. They cleaned that key first to make sure nobody else was on there, and then put Stevens on there. Too many things. Sharon says, what is the difference between the two departments, sheriff and police? They have two different jurisdictions. So like I live in DuPage County, and then I have my local police department, and then there's the sheriff department. If you live in an unincorporated area, sheriffs are who respond to you. And if you live in incorporated, it's the police department. So and then a police chief is hired, a sheriff is elected. So those are the first things I can say off the top of my head. Cheryl says, everyone's been lying from day one. Yeah, lots of lies. Nikki says, do you speak to Stephen regularly? Hope he's in good spirits. It's got to be so tough. I don't speak to him regularly. I'm not one of the groupies that have a scheduled weekly call. I'm not somebody who's gonna pretend to be a buddy with somebody else so I can get on his regular phone list. Stephen calls me when he wants. So there can be months without hearing from him. He called me last Sunday. Was it a Sunday or a Friday? He called me a Sunday, and then he called me a Friday. Now, within a month, those two calls. And so Stephen never calls me that often. And I don't know if he'll be calling me at some point tonight. That's also why I'm wondering why my phone, when I'm getting notifications, I'm not hearing the sound of it. So I'm making sure I'm watching my phone in case he does call me tonight. So he doesn't call me regularly, but every time I talk to him, he is in good spirits. He's always laughing. So that's something I liked about in part 2, when they would play phone conversations with Stephen. He's laughing and positive, and so that's been my experience with him. Ashley says, why is Barb defending Bobby, and what about Ryan Hilgas? She's defending Bobby because that's her son, and she doesn't want her son to go to prison. And, so that I get. I do get that. But she's got to know that Bobby did this. So he needs help, especially when you see what was on that computer. The guy needs help. And Ryan Hilgas, I believe he planted the vehicle on the salvage yard with the police. Cheryl says, everyone's been lying. The only one who hasn't is sitting in prison, for fuck's sakes. Yes. Stephen, his story never changes. So, Brendan's story actually never changes. If he gets to talk without being manipulated, his story is the same. It's only when they keep talking to him and confusing him and wanting him to say things, that's when his story is different. Jodeci says, do you think the confession Brendan made could have been true, but was really what Scott and Bobby done, and Scott threatened him, making him say other words that him and Stephen done it? No. My opinion of the brief time I used to talk to Brendan on the phone and what I know about the case, A, talking to dog, is he wouldn't be able to live with himself to cover up a lie like this, that you would see it. So the thing that Kayla lied about, saying that Brendan was crying and all this, and it's because he was guilty, blah, 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 which that wasn't true at all. But that's true. That would be true if he actually knew somebody had killed somebody. He would have said something to somebody. He would not be able to just keep that to himself. He would have told Amy, point blank. He would have told Amy on the phone or in one of her visits with him, or her son Jake, that he bonded with. There's no way Brendan's going to be able to live with that lie. Catherine said, and Ryan initially didn't tell them he was an ex. Why hide that? Because you don't want to be a suspect. Ashley says, the Ryan Hilgust thing drives me nuts. How did he end up with the piece of her schedule? Because he helped police. He got her spare key from her house and helped police move the car. And now I have to switch because 2 dogs went out and 1 didn't. And now the other one's wanting to go up. Let's go. Sean, where's Bobby's alibi from the time he saw Bobby at 3 until he was with Barb at 5 or whatever? Well, he was hunting, remember? But didn't Barb say something recently that there's a witness that could prove either Scott or Bobby were where they say they were? Yeah, so Scott was hunting. And where was Scott going hunting? Where was that? Because then if he was picking Barb up at 5 to go back to Green Bay to go visit his mom that he claims he was there during the day, why wouldn't he just hunt at his house if he knew he didn't have a whole lot of time to do it and Bobby's going to go hunting in his backyard? Ashley said, what would Ryan have to gain from moving the car, though? That's what I don't get. Because he believed the police said, my theory, police said Stephen did this. Last place she was Stephen's house. Stephen this, Stephen that. So they think Stephen is guilty. And then they say he's embroiled in a case right now with Manitowoc Sheriff's Department. And it's going to be hard for us to get a guilty verdict because they're just going to think we're setting him up because of this other thing. And we have no real evidence because at that point they had nothing. We have no real evidence. We need to make sure that he goes away for this. And so that's why Ryan would plant the car there. So he's doing it because he wants to make sure Teresa's killer is found guilty. Because he'd have no reason not to believe the police department or sheriff's department. My theory. San says, they said the bones they found were 10 to 20% the amount of the total bones for a human fire. Where are the rest? If you were trying to hide the evidence, why would you leave a few in your burn pit to be found? Right. When there are alleged bones found at the different spots in the quarry, why would you then bring it back and go, I'm going to put it in my fire pit here, and I'm going to throw some in my burn barrel, and I'll throw some in Barb's for good measure? Why would you, if you're driving the RAV4 in the quarry, why would you then park it on salvage yard property? I've been through that quarry. I drove my car through there. I've been down the conveyor road. That place is, big trees and stuff everywhere. You could ditch a car on that property and you're not going to find it. So even if you're looking for a place, a temporary place, you're going to place the car. So say if it's Steven and there's just not enough time to gut that car and crush it, if you're already back in the quarry, you would just leave it there and walk back to the salvage yard. And then when you have the opportunity to move the car, then you'd move the car. Nobody's going to find it at the quarry. Or that pond that was right there, you have the pond and then you have the road that the car was found. That pond is deep enough that you could have submerged that car in there and people wouldn't see it. So makes no sense that you would have the car and the body off property and you would bring it back onto your property in plain sight. Connie, but in the jury pool, Stephen's lawyers should have caught that and dismissed those jurors, correct? You're only allowed X amount of strikes, and I talked to Buting about this. You're only allowed X amount of strikes. And they had that jury pool so fixed that, believe it or not, there were even worse jurors that they had removed. And then you're out of strikes. And that's how it happened with this case. So that's how the state stacked that jury pool, that you were getting rid of these and now you're out of the strikes. And then, here comes Carl Ward's more manipulation. San says, I'm sorry, but I was so happy to see Jody arrested again. Another sellout. Yeah, that floated around. It's been shared here in gossip too, that Jody's just a drunk. And so she's arrested for that all the time. So apparently she's just been arrested for it again. Big shock. Julie says, being 3 members of the jury were connected or related to the sheriff's department, could there have been a mistrial? They proved them in the jury and it was known. So the problem is they never should have been allowed in the jury pool, that there's a conflict. That's what should have happened. San says, when you skip posts, they show up again later, FYI. Oh, do they? Okay. Good to know, because there's 190 posts after where I'm at currently, and I've been on for over 2 hours. Sharon says, what about the burn barrel given the all clear on the 8th, but remains were found in it on the 12th? Right? Yeah, there's lots of stuff like that are obvious things that prove the planting. Julie says, is Chuck Carla's father? Yes, Chuck is Carla's father. Catherine, and Kratz couldn't press the additional charges against Steven as insufficient evidence, and next thing, Brendan is there confessing with the assistance of Fassbender and Wiegert, and then Kratz has the evidence he needed for the 3 additional charges. He said to the press that he needed the outside help to prove those additional charges. You just want to grr. Pisses you off. Connie says, that is a U.S. law. Spouse does not have to testify against each other, but they can choose to, just cannot be forced to. Thank you very much, Connie. Connie says, kills me when Kratz will say, I don't have the case file in front of me. Dude, this was the biggest case of your career. You know it by memory, inside and out. Good try. Yeah. Roll says, Laura Nyrider is great, committed, and devoted, but she proved to be too lightweight in the 7th Circuit hearing, as compared to Luke Burke. Kathleen would have crushed the judges because they showed they were ignorant about the facts of the case. Yeah, and I like Laura Nyrider, but I came out of there going, oh, she did not look good at all. I was surprised that she was so ill prepared. I don't know if, is she now, because it's hard not to get personally invested in Brendan, because he's so sweet and simple, So was that getting in the way for her? I don't know, but I thought I agree. It was a poor showing. And yeah, Luke Berg was horrible. So bad. Jodeci says, just like Kratz painted a very detailed pic to make people hate the Averys and lose a lot of money due to the junkyard, and then turns around and makes a book. What about to happen when this whole story changes due to evidence and truth? Ken had it bad for Stephen. Will Ken get in trouble for the false reports? That is something that will be considered. It all depends how this all ends up. Jodeci continues with, so if Bobby and Scott did do it, where will Brendan go with his mom who is protecting her husband? I don't know. I don't know what happens there. And Connie is asking, are Pete and Lori, and it's the latter, Lori is Lori, still married? Yes, they are. Lori wants nothing to do with this case. So I don't know if Lori would want Brendan living with them. And I don't know Pete's relationship with her. So I don't know what happens to Brendan. Because I also don't know if, we don't know how much into this Barb really is. So will Barb be prosecuted as well? So I guess but here's what I will say, is Laura Nyrider will make sure there's a place for Brendan. She's not going to just have him walk out those doors into the unknown. She'll make sure there's some place for him. Ashley says, who is this Carla woman? Carla is Stephen's niece, Brendan's cousin. And she's an evil twat. Sorry, I know. I'm a bad person for name calling. Ashley says, do you think that Barb set Brendan up? No. I honestly do not. I do not think Barb may not even truly know the full extent of what happened because she doesn't want to know and is choosing not to be told what happened. I do not think she set Brendan up. At worst, it will be when it looked like there was no other way out, just let Brendan go down for it because he was 16 and she believed that his IQ and age would get him charged as a juvenile and put in a juvenile detention home and out when he was 18, as opposed to Bobby, who was 18 and would go to prison for the sentence that Brendan got. So I do not think she set him up. Heather says, wait, she spends his commissary funds? No, Barb doesn't have access to the commissary funds. She spends the GoFundMe. Caroline says, I don't understand that either. If it was my son, I demand to be there at the interview. Yep. Connie says, someone caught that from the show. He said about his account being out of money for phone calls. They asked how, with all the funds being set in from outsiders, where has the money gone that was sent to him? Silence. That's a good point. Because see what Kathleen does with Stephen and her, like Melissa Kaluzinski, is when they want money, when their commissary is low, they tell her and she puts money in it. You do not want a commissary to have unlimited funds in it because these people can be manipulated and their money stolen. It has happened to Brendan on occasion that another inmate got his PIN number, got into his account, and took it out. It also happens that when you're doing your commissary, when you're ordering your stuff, you're like at an ATM machine, in a screen. And another inmate can look over your shoulder and say, hey, get me those ho-hos. Do ho-hos even exist anymore? Or they'll even touch it and make it order. And Brendan's going to be nice or whatever, and then give them the stuff. And the people will be looking over your shoulder and seeing what your balance is. You can be manipulated. So therefore, you're only going to put X amount in there at a time. You don't want all this money going to the commissary. And I know there's people that argue with me on that, and they'll say, Stephen's a seasoned prisoner and nobody's going to take advantage of him. You don't know. So why can't you just send the money to Kathleen and have Kathleen put it in the account? Mark it and say, this is for Stephen. I want this to go in Stephen's commissary. You know? So same thing goes for the phone. But I don't get that. Okay, here's how the phone calls work with me. With all the people that call me. I have an account. And I put money on it. And when they call me, I'm charged for it. So now the inmate also has an account that you put money on for them to make the calls. So I'm assuming then Barb is just trying to use Brendan's money for calls. She should be using her own fucking money. So, and then I will get, I think now it's where I get a text message telling me I'm low. And same thing goes when you go to visit the inmate. When you want to buy him all this stuff in the vending machine, you have a card. Hold on. Where's my purse? For Kent Pellegrini. So I have this card because he's in Taylorville prison. There's kind of a glare. You can never kind of see on here. All right. But it's like a ATM card thing. It's got a little chip in it. So when I get to the prison, then I go to the ATM machine and I put this card in there. And then I have to have cash. You can't use another card or whatever. It has to be cash. And then I put cash in it. And so the cash that I put in the machine then goes on this card. And so then when you're in the prison and you're buying them the food and the snacks and all the stuff they want, all the vending machines, you use this card on it. And then the money comes out like a debit card. And so then I keep it. So like this one, when I visited Kent, I put $60 on it. And Kent never wants a whole lot. So Kent got chicken. He got chicken. He wanted a candy bar and he wanted Pepsi. And then he asked me if he could have a second Pepsi. And then he asked me for a second candy bar. And he felt bad asking me for it because Kent is somebody that he doesn't want donations from people. None of that. And the prisoner is not allowed to go to the vending machine. So he has to tell me that he wants something and I go get it. And so that same thing happens with Brendan. And this card, I believe, and I haven't tested it. I don't know if I can because Melissa Kaluzinski is also in an Illinois prison. So I don't know if I can use, and her prison is not far from Kent's. And so I don't know if I could use this at Melissa's. But when I go with Paul to Melissa's, I just give him money to put on the card that he already has for Melissa to buy the food. Okay, Jodeci says, yeah, I thought underage there had to be parents' consent. Under 18, though, they could not speak with any. It's not. And that's something I learned from part one, that I thought that was a law, that you could not interrogate a minor without a parent's knowledge or consent. It's not. So it was perfectly legal for them to talk to Brendan without anybody in the room. And it's wrong. That should not, there should be a law against that. San says, all these people saying they're putting money in their home safe, that's not a safe thing to say online. Yeah. And Barb says it all the time. It's in my safe. It's in my safe. That reminds me of so my boyfriend Jeff is annoyed with the episodes of part 2, because he says, so my boyfriend is known as the printer guy. That's what we called him. He owns a print shop. And so he's the one that made all the shirts. And, so when you're watching this part 2, everything in there is stuff that he printed. Every shirt you see Barb wear, Jeff made that. Every shirt Scott's wearing, Alan's wearing, Carla, Stacy, the banners they're holding, all that is stuff that Jeff printed. And so then even on a shot when they're showing Barb's house and you see the sign that says security cameras in use, Jeff printed that for them too and gave that to them. And he was like, oh, great. Another thing I printed and was never paid for, yet we're called thieves. So he printed those for them. Jody C says, fuck what the people think. If we are willing to buy them to help support Stephen and Brendan, sell them. Don't tell people, ruin it for you. I don't know what you were saying there. Sorry, Jody C. Cherry says, any idea who went to that trash mag saying Dolores is keeping money in her home? I feel for her safety with weirdos possibly breaking in for money. Was that the one with the letter? You have to tell me if it's a letter, because if it's a letter, it's Sarah is her name. Connie says, as well, they didn't use any fingerprint evidence. They would have used a mix of evidence, and they only went after DNA. Specifically, I feel because DNA freed him in the first case. Freed him, okay, in the first place. He never could have wiped all of his prints from that car. There were prints found on the car that they just never looked into. So there's unidentified prints on that vehicle. Heather says, I learned that I don't want to work for Auto Trader. Good grief, $8. I think my boyfriend's home. Yeah. Who knows what it is now, but wow. Jodeci says, to be honest, I feel this had a lot to do with Auto Trader causes stuff like this. Going to pay $18, but through Auto Trader, it's only $8. How do you make sure your employees are safe or their whereabouts when you set them up for failure like this? Pay you more doing it on their own. It falls a lot on Auto Traders. If they called and check in, I'm here, be back now, it would have never been blamed on Stephen. Mm-hmm. Caroline says, has he seen the documentary? I assume he knows it's been released now. Stephen's never seen either. The first part 1, somebody had transcribed it, somebody from Europe, and they sent it to him. So he was able to read what was all in it. He does not get to see it. He doesn't have access to that and doesn't get permission. So he knew it was coming out on Friday because I had talked to him the Sunday before that. So I know he knows, and I know he's talked to people. I haven't talked to him. I know he's talked to other people, but I have not talked to him since Making Murder's been out yet. But he does have people he can talk to that will tell him what's in it. Jodeci says, Bobby could handle this better than Brendan. There's my boyfriend out in the front window now. Caroline says, why would her ex help the police do that? Because he wanted to frame a guilty man. He wanted to make sure that Stephen wouldn't get away with it. That the police told him that Stephen was guilty, that Stephen did this, but they needed for sure proof because he was currently suing the sheriff's department. Mike says, did anybody besides the owner of the quarry cooperate with Kathleen that you know of? Kathleen's talked to a bunch of people. It's just family who, Chuck has given her access to the yard and the trailers and stuff. So, yeah, but the quarry thing, wasn't that a big deal when you heard Ross Josh Radant say that the police told him that this is the way the car drove through here, so admitting that the car had left the salvage yard, and how they were trying to get him to lie about the size of the fire. I found that really interesting. Sand says maybe he was hunting for Teresa with his bow. Yeah. Jodeci says, like, they are broke, but Barbara goes and gets a huge tattoo out of state. How are you able to do either one with no money to pay for a $500 tattoo or even leave town? I'm confused. That tattoo did not cost $500. It was a planned trip to go visit Amy in Michigan. Her and Scott were staying with Amy. That tattoo was something the three of us had talked about, and that three of us were going to get. I was in Texas visiting Jeff, whose ass you see behind me in the window as he's like cleaning out the turtle pond in front of the house, obviously. So I was in Texas. We had no clue what was going to happen in Brendan's case. The tattoo was done by a friend of Amy's, so it didn't cost anywhere near that. So the tattoo was of the logo that Amy had come up with the idea of what she wanted it to look like, and then my boyfriend Jeff is who fully designed it. So I think I still have the shirt sitting here from our live. Because now I have jeans on, so I can't roll it up. So this is the logo. This way. So it says Justice for Brendan, and it's got the dragonfly. And then it has the website that I write for, freebrendan.org, underneath it. So that tattoo didn't cost what people would think it did. I have the same tattoo, and I got it done by my tattoo artist. And it cost me, I think, like $130. Catherine says, they do not want the truth to come out and justice for Teresa, as they will be sued massively. And in my opinion, they will owe SH. It might be, you meant SA for Stephen Avery, the balance of his first suit. And then again for this miscarriage, and they would have to pay Brendan as well. Yep. Connie says, the scent dogs. Ooh, that's Mr. Ass behind me was the biggest thing. The scent dogs have me confused. How they tracked her scent all over the place. Tonight I will be watching again, because according to what I am seeing, she was all over the place. I think it's because that's where the RAV4 was all driven. And that these 9 different dogs all were following that same scent. You know, so going from, because it's amazing to me to see how close all those things are. Like I said, I need to drive up there and I'll show you by recording and walking it so you can see just how close these things are together. And I'll have Jeff fly his drone. That Kuss Road cul-de-sac is right there with the cul-de-sac and then where the salvage yard is and the quarries. It's all so close. And so from that car driving, you know, out of the salvage yard and through the quarry and all that, and these scent dogs were like walking along there. And then you have where the alleged parts of her were found in the 2 different spots in the quarries. And then you have over on Kuss Road where she was buried temporarily. And that's what the dogs were following. Cindy says, does anybody know how far back cell phone use can be investigated? Why wouldn't they check her ex's cell phone pings to see where he was the day the murder would have taken place? Right. And I've said, why aren't they looking at Colburn's? Where was Colburn? Because he made that call from his personal cell phone. He did not make it from a police radio. So where was Colburn when he called in those plates? That's what I want to know. And why hasn't anybody found that or gotten that? Catherine says, to destroy a human body in a fire in the open, you would need an extreme fire, and it would need constant attention and refueling for at least 16 to 18 hours. This is scientific fact. In a crematorium where it is specifically set, it takes up to 4 hours, and the ground soil can actually test for the debris, mineral composition, etc., from a burned body. It gives off specific fumes and smells. Right. And the thing also that people forget about is Jody called Stephen twice throughout that. And he's perfectly calm. You know, so if she's interrupting him, mutilating a body, isn't he going to sound annoyed, rushed, breathing heavy? And at that time, you couldn't call a cell phone. You could only call a landline. So he's also he has to be in his house during those calls. So was Brendan the one stoking the bones in the fire at the time while he's in on those phone calls? Caroline says, I'm expecting them both to be retrialed or released very soon. The new evidence is too strong and they can't ignore it. Yeah, but they keep doing it. I don't get our system. I don't get it. It's horrible. And wasn't it said somewhere in Making a Murderer how it's, you know, quick to get them in and then forever to get them out? Are you going to shower? Okay. Catherine says smells and minerals, etc. Sharon says in the UK, we don't have sheriffs, just police. So thanks for explaining. No problem. Leba says, if they let Brendan out, it would blow up Stephen's case. Yeah. Connie says, where is Brad's mom? I don't know. I don't know anything about her. So no clue. Leba says, isn't Brad Barb's? No. She was only his stepmom. Brad is from a prior relationship that Pete had. Diane says, hi guys, I'm late. Yeah, well, I've been on here blabbing for 2.5 hours. So Catherine says, is there a possibility that Barb knows some stuff and is afraid of Scott and Bobby? Scott has shown his aggression and temper publicly, so possibly that is felt by Barb. Just a thought. I'm not going to say no. I guess that's a possibility. I think it's just because they're stuck in this and they just have to keep going with what they have. Deandra says, I noticed in part 2 that when Barb was on the phone with Brendan, he couldn't call back because he was low on money. How? What's Barb doing with the money? Well, we just talked about that a little bit ago, so hopefully you got that answer. And since there's still 224 comments and I've been on 2.5 hours, I'm going to need to try and start streamlining this because now my boyfriend's home from work and it's almost 6 and need to do dinner. And that's a reply. Roll said, Barb said detectives wouldn't let her go in with Brendan when he was questioned. Has that been proven untrue? And did she ask to be with Mike O'Kelly's session? They never wouldn't let her go. They told her it would be best if she didn't go in. And so she listened. But if that were my kid, I'm not listening to you and I'm going in there. I don't know about the Mike O'Kelly session. I think the Mike O'Kelly session might have been when Barb was in court divorcing Tom Yonda. Catherine said, and one of Brendan's write-ups in prison, one of 3 minor write-ups, was he asked an image for noodles as he was hungry, and that's a violation. How could Brendan be hungry? If it was my child, I would ensure that they have enough comms to be able to eat and have calls. Maybe that's just me. I wouldn't give too much to put them at risk, but 2 up when they need. Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. Levis says, feel sorry for Brendan. His mother is a liar. Connie says, see, when I was in my paralegal classes, I was taught it was law. You cannot interview a minor without a lawyer. I cannot for the life of me, though, remember the case. And it was an Illinois case. I wish so bad I still had my books. Well, I know Illinois just passed something last year. And even that, they weren't able to get it to be 18 and under. And the only thing they were able to pass then was 15 and under. Janet says, so do they still have the RAV4? Yeah, the state still has the RAV4. Catherine says, I am in the UK, and just a question about Brendan's interview. Here in UK, a child under 18 or vulnerable adult requires someone called an appropriate adult present. That can be a parent, teacher, social worker, support worker, or someone from the government scheme of appropriate adults that the police call. Yeah, I wish we had what you have there, because Diane said, I had no idea they didn't allow the coroner anywhere near the scene. That poor woman. San says, no, it wasn't the letter. I saw it on one of the sites just yesterday. Sorry, I don't know what. Oh.